Yeah.
That
Um,
camera makes a big difference, Kavalya.
The camera? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah, it's
We
really
got
good.
nice.
the mic and the camera going on. We should be good.
How did your thing go this morning?
Yeah, it went really well.
Good.
It went well. And it was so interesting. I got some news that was both kind of exciting and jarring at the same time. And it just, I'm, I was surprised I was able to still just drop in and in my kind of exhaustion that I'm in right now. Sarah, I've been going and going lately, but yeah, I was able to drop in and they really appreciated the info and it felt very helpful to them. And it was good. I got to offer a little sound at the end.
Good, good.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do? Is that like your living?
Yeah. What I do, no matter what I'm doing, I realize is energetics. It's truly what I seem to be tapped into, whether I'm teaching yoga or teaching fascia yoga, working with the fascial lines in the body, or offering the human design and astrology readings and classes that I've been offering, or even just sitting with Leslie last night. We had quite a, or I was anyway, no, I'm just kidding. We had quite an energetic experience going on. Yeah, I had a lot of clearing just from sitting and having a conversation. So generally, I think it's just, oh yeah, and the sound healing, it's all just energetics.
Yeah. Yeah, sound energy can be quite effective if it's because it's like old technology too. I mean,
Yeah. And what I really like to offer is, besides the singing bowls, it's the gong. I have a gong, and it's all the frequencies. It's like all the frequencies. It's tuned to a specific asteroid. It's my gong specifically is tuned to Chiron, and there's so many different types of gongs out there. But yeah, it's very powerful. Everyone who experiences it for the first time, they're either out sleeping, right, or they come back and they say like, "Wow, that was really interesting. I've never heard anything like that."
It's like traveling, a journey.
that's cool. Yeah.
And Kavalya is
Yeah.
also a chef too, trained and really excellent cook.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
That was my original kind of schooling that I did for quite a while.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a fan of the crock pot because I don't have to do anything.
Yes.
Yeah, because like it's so like people are always like shocked because I'm considered like a creative, but like I'd rather, jump into a lake and drown myself than have to cook a lot. I'm like I don't know what it is. Like I'll cook and I can cook if I want to, but
Yeah.
it's just not my thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's my daughter's thing. It's my mom's thing. They love cooking, but I'm just like, oh my God, is it finished yet? Like, I'm really like the worst.
I'm picking up on that inspiration with the crock pot. I think I'm going to utilize that a bit more in the
Oh
busy
my
day.
God. I'm telling you, you can like really cook anything in a crock pot. Anything. Like, oh my God, it's awesome. I'm like, yes, just turn it on and do the thing. Like that's my cooking. Do the thing. It's fine.
Leslie, you gotta get the crock pot going on.
That's a good idea. That's actually a super good idea.
Like I make all kinds of stuff.
Plan enough. I have to just plan ahead, right? You have to know what you're going to put in the pot.
Oh, I know you don't.
No,
I don't do that. No,
I just go with the flow, whatever you got, right?
Yeah, I just throw all that shit in. It's fine. It'll be fine. Like I've cooked turkeys in my crock pot. I've cooked frittatas, just eggs, and really you can put anything you want in that. I've made potatoes in there. Oh, you know what's great in a crock pot instead of boiling it on the stove? Steaming it in the crock pot. That pasta. Like if you put pasta in there, steam it for like 10 minutes, it comes out perfect and none of that weird white fuzzy shit. But I mean, I use OR water anyway, but it's just easier.
When you cook a frittata, are you sort of frying it? Like, are you adding oil or water, or what do you not a lot of water, right?
So I put like a little, like I get some kind of like porcelain or metal or whatever, glass or whatever you want, little bowl or something, something you might bake in. And then I have like a little stand to lift it off the bottom, and I take the pot out. And then I put the stand in, and then I put the pot in, and I mix all my eggs and all the crap that I put in, which I'll put in like seasonings and cheese and tomatoes and potatoes, and you can put anything you want. It's eggs. And then I stick it in there, and I put like a little bit of water in it. I'll cover it with tin foil on the glass pot, and then I close it, and then I cook it for about I guess it's more like steaming, but probably about an hour and a half or an hour. Depends on the crock pot. And then it comes out like a frittata. Pretty easy.
And then while that's happening, you're like knitting or sewing or doing other creative things, right?
Yeah, I would really literally be writing or crocheting or something. Feel like I could. That's like the weird thing. I could sit here and knit for like 12, 15 hours straight. And then my doctor, I went to my doctor. I'm like, my wrists are like killing me. This was like years ago. I go to her. I'm like, my wrists are like broken. And she's like, Sarah, how long do you knit in a day? I'm like, I don't know, half of it. She's like, stop doing that. Like, what are you, retarded? Like she was nicer about it, but that's basically the message. Like, don't be stupid. Don't.
How do you manage that now, like with your time? Because it's like carpal tunnel, like risk, right? From the same.
Yeah, it's like it's the same though. Like it's the same kind of risk if you type a lot, if you tattoo a lot, if you do anything that's with your hands, you run the risk of things like early onset arthritis or carpal tunnel, stuff like that. But
so this is where I kind of thrive in these understandings, because once I started learning about the fascia and the connective tissue in the body, plantar fasciitis, carpal tunnels, like none of this stuff actually has to exist. It's amazing, but it just takes regular maintenance. Regular maintenance and learning how to work with your fascia in different ways, either with pressure and time, or I use a lot of different props. Like I have these little trigger balls you can use on your hands to open up the connective tissue in the wrists.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's starting to come out scientifically about just how much working with the fascia can alleviate some of these things that people live chronically with. It's amazing to me. It's changed my whole body, my relationship to my body. It's changed my whole practice and how I teach.
It was a while ago, but they started coming out with where the medical industry was accepting it as a viable option, where like even stuff like arthritis and dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that, where they're saying that if you are somebody who deals with that, like there's a thing that they say, move it or lose it. So that's the same, like working with your body, like the insides, like what you're talking about, and the outsides as well. And they started saying, if you are dealing with problems like that are chronic, or probably any chronic problem, if you just like took, even at your pace, a walk every single day for like 10 minutes, you are going to reduce all of that shit by like a landslide. And that's like, they were able to prove that happened. They've even been able to reverse a lot of those issues because of just that.
That's just touching the surface in a way, like, and I think what like Kavalya studies and does is like layers deeper, and that is information that isn't shared in the mainstream. It's like you have to go to the specialists, even in the yoga world. Like most yoga teachers don't know this material, right, Kavalya?
Yeah. It's not a wide body of knowledge for most movement people yet. It's getting there. It's getting out there for, you know, maybe a decade or 15 years, but it's creeping in there. Now some yoga teacher trainings are starting to use this book called Anatomy Trains, which is Tom Meyer's work with the fascial lines. So we have connective tissue everywhere, but now he's outlined, probably 20 years ago, he started doing this work, if not longer. He outlined fascial lines that run from foot to head, and different depths in the body and different connections to different muscles. And it's that's the method that I've been working with specifically. That's Anatomy Trains in Motion. Yeah.
And I think there's I don't know if this is related to that, but I think there's a lot to say about the metaphysical side of this type of healing as well. Like, you know, how it's not just like about what you do with your body to like maintenance it or whatever. It's like how you view yourself as well.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, for sure. And, you know, a couple of things on that, is that because the connective tissue in our body is not only our structure that literally holds the bones together and what makes us one thing, it's not just our structure, it's also lines of communication. So because every system in the body is embedded in the fascial network, the communication from your receptors for pressure and heat and touch and pain and all those things, they're actually in the fascial tissue, not the muscle, not the bone. But they end up being pathways of communication through the central nervous system to the brain. So when you start to and also energy. So they, you know, in science they'll call it kinetic energy. It stores energy available for use, whereas you use your muscle, it's contractual energy. It's a little different. It's like you have to demand or say like, okay, I'm going to contract this muscle. I'm going to take a step and those muscles are going to work. But because we're talking about energy, when you work with the fascial lines, you are actually more conductive. You're like more of a conduit for energy to run through your body. And that can mean so many things. It can mean kinetic energy. It can mean grounding earth energy. It can mean your ability to sense and feel. And I think that, you know, everybody brings their own medicine, and this is my medicine. This is what I have to offer. Is like, I'm such a deep feeler, and it's been considered by myself such a curse for a long, long time, being such a deep feeler. But I'm recognizing that I'm teaching people how to go more deeply into their bodies, how they can feel their intuition. And pretty much everything that I've gravitated towards studying is like, the message is get out of your head, get into your body, and listen to the messages. Because if your spirit, if your soul, if your life force is in your body, and that is our intuition and our direct connection to all that is, that's our guide. And so if we're not even in our body and we don't want to be there and it's painful or we're distracted, we're not getting those clear messages. So having the fascia be clear is just super helpful if that's something which the work you want to do, which I think everyone should.
Yeah, no, I think that would be wise advice to really like kind of think about it. But it making me think. Would you say that this is like an alignment? Like if you were going to correlate it in a clinical way, would this be like something that would align with the, say, lymphatic system? Because I'll tell you, the lymphatic system. I mean, I'm sure, you know, people who understand the medical world a little bit, the lymphatic system is a very vital part of the entire biological body, physical body. It is a message. It's a messenger really for the entire system. And when that is dysfunctional or becomes dysfunctional for whatever reason, it causes a lot of miscommunication in the system, the physical body, so that your body can't read each other and do the things, you know, it should be able to do normally. Yeah. So what's interesting, it's making me think now in the medical industry at large, very, very few doctors will talk about the lymphatic system. They won't go there. There are people who do specialize in it and will work with it. But because the lymphatic system is really a key, it's a, like, you know, I was saying before, the the chloride function in your system is a foundation in your system. The lymphatic system is part of that foundation. So they won't talk about the lymphatic system because the lymphatic system causing it becoming damaged somehow will cause all sorts of problems in the body. But instead of the medical industry looking at the lymphatic system and trying to figure out how to repair that, they will look at the problems a dysfunctional lymphatic system will cause and treat that, which is never really a full treatment. So it just made me think of that because you're talking about this like it's a communication system within your body.
Yeah.
The lymphatic system is like, I would consider the physical organ that does that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
Yeah, they have similarities. And what I'm thinking of is, the lymphatic system is, this always stuck out to me, the garbage disposal of our body, right? And it also carries white blood cells around, if that's correct, right? So similar to the fascial network, the fascia is like a crystalline structure. And because every system is inside of this crystalline structure that's literally wrapped around every single piece and part of the body, it's interesting to me how they share some qualities. So in between the fascial structures and the layers, there's hyaluronic acid, which we know probably from like maybe some skincare at this point, but the hyaluronic acid inside of that, it's made of water, it's made of minerals, and it's basically like the same chemical construction or same chemical mixture as seawater, as the ocean. Like we have the ocean inside of us. And so that liquid that can be bound up in those fascial structures when the structures don't move, that doesn't get to do its job, which sends nutrients, which cleans out your tissues. These little fibroblast cells will start to eat up the dead collagen from most tissues made out of collagen and elastin, if not just collagen, but it will start to eat up the dead tissue of collagen. These fibroblasts, it's their only job, spit out new collagen. And so those dead things need to be carried away. So somehow there must be a transfer between the lymphatic system and this hyaluronic acid that's in the fascia. And when we press and release, like you might do if you had some wrist stuff going on, that's hydrating the tissues is what they call it, because you get the hyaluronic acid to warm up, and then that can start to move and flow. And
create the flow in the body. Yeah. No, that makes entirely too much sense. But the medical industry won't talk about it, just like they won't talk about the pineal gland, just like they won't talk about certain types of cancers and why you have it. Like, they won't talk about certain conditions that wouldn't exist if the lymphatic system didn't get damaged. So one of my personal theories is that they don't look at the lymphatic system because they know that if you ignore the maintenance or damage the lymphatic system, you can actually hurt everything else in your body, including it, like the metaphysical parts of it, like, because I do think there's the physical body, there's the spiritual body, and they're part of, it's just as much an organ as your physical body, you have to maintain that as well. And they know the lymphatics. My personal theory is that it's like connected, and that's why they won't talk about it. And they won't deal, even when people have medical problems that are chronic that come from a damaged lymphatic system, they still won't look at the lymphatic system, like cancers that come from it, for example. So it's interesting, the correlation, like what you're talking about. And I'm like, that actually makes a lot of sense because everything in our system is connected, and we do both need both the physical and the non-physical to function as, like a entity in reality.
A high vibratory, high voltage energetic being, right? And this corresponds to some of the energy practices and my understanding of the cosmology of in Peru. The Pacos, or medicine men who specialize in energy work, have the concept that we have an energy bubble, a field, a pokpo, they call it, and all our organs and all our systems have their own energy bubble. And that as humans, what happens is the energy flow in our system gets blocked or stagnant, and or tied up, or however you might want to describe it, and that we can through our intention, direct the divine sort of Sami energy, which is the divine sort of high vibratory natural. It's the natural energy, and we can visualize, washing our energetic body and moving the stagnancies and increasing the energy flow and increasing the speed and that vibratory vibration and voltage, so that it's then pushed through and then released. They call it the hucha, the sort of blockage and the excess, and releasing that into the earth herself, right? As almost like a composting of energy that then recirculates into the Sami, into the divine energy. So that's, I think of like how, we are energy, right? And material, when at its root is, energy, it's space, it's water, through which frequency and vibration operates. And we have this power of visualization where we can do our own sort of healing processes, even outside of the medical system, right? So this isn't taught.
Qigong is kind of similar what you're describing. You take a different color of energy or different colors of mist and you bring it into a specific organ, or you're washing it through a body in a specific way, and building the energy in a certain place to then disperse it. It's very similar to what you were describing.
Right. And use of sound, or associated with different organs, right? And sounding, or using, I'm studying a little bit about frequency, vibration, and sound and how it impacts our bodies, and the studies of Rife, the Rife machine, and discoveries around how frequency shifts around the material, or transforms one thing to another thing. And
there's a stone, right, called organite, I think it's called, which is supposed to be very beneficial for that kind of thing as well. I think Jay Parker was the first person I heard about organite from. But yeah, what you're talking about, like, I wouldn't know like the different cultures and how they tap into that kind of stuff, but that stuff is totally real, because, and I've like actually been able to stump my medical team in the past, because I was able to do things that they would classify as impossible. And I didn't necessarily do it. Well, really, I was doing it with the combination of the treatments that they could offer that I'm very picky about. I'll be like, yeah, I'll take this one and not that one and this one, because I'm, I don't worship the priest in the white lab coat. I'm like, I'm not a pet for you to experiment on. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I go about it. But it was, what I see it as is a combination between the physical of what they can offer with science or physical science in the man world, the physical realm, and then the metaphysical, like what you're talking about, like what we do energetically, what we do with our mind, and our intention and our will. And like that stuff is totally real. And like some people who are still denying that that's real is like, I just don't know if they were to reflect a little bit more on their own past experiences, they might find that they're proving themselves wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, like,
there are some scientific experiments that, the ones that talk about okay, this controlled study group is going to think about playing the piano for 3 weeks. And this one's actually going to practice the same song for 3 weeks. And like,
yeah,
somehow the people who even didn't can do it. And it's the same with building muscle. I'm going to think about building muscle, right? Doing this motion, and then the people actually do it, and they actually have like a 30% gain or something like that.
Yeah, and that's why I always suggest to people Dr. Joe Dispenza, because he could explain it a whole lot better than I, but it's very clinical because he's like a neurologist. So I mean, he's coming from that world. He's not just like a spiritualist.
He had that direct experience, you know. He laid with a broken back and 9 spots for 9 weeks, just thinking about, because he was a chiropractor, he knew how the spine was constructed, he knew all the pieces, all the parts, he had it visualized, and he just sat there and reconstructed himself after they told him he was never going to walk. You know,
and people should think about this. I have a friend who was well, I won't tell you her story. She actually wrote a book. And I'll add the name of the book, guys, in the description for people listening. But I grew up with her, and she has an incredible story that really changed how she viewed things when we were younger. But she has a very similar story to that. I have a couple of stories like that. And I'll share that. And I'd love to hear from you guys and from anybody listening to this, your stories in this that are classified as impossible. But years and years ago, I think about 2008, I was given 2 years to live. I had the left portion of my left lung rotten. It was completely rotted out. And when that happens, in the medical industry, they're like, that's impossible. You can't reverse that. That's done. We cut it out. That's it. Because to them, you can't reverse that. They will classify it that way. Now, they start looking at you for lung transplants and stuff like that. So, and this was a buildup over many, many years that this happened, and it was only the left bottom portion of my lungs. And I could feel it. Almost every day, I could actually feel it. It was like somebody like stuck a knife right there in my back every day. And that's the physical expression that this took. And it was rotted. It was finished, you know, so, but I spent several years, and it did take several years. And this is where I tell people, be patient with yourself, be patient with this process. Trust the process, allow it to take place. Don't try to control the wheel of it too much. Allow yourself to do this. So like I had it, I was starting to, I mean, this is actually kind of before I knew about Dr. Joe Dispenza and a lot of this stuff, but I had a motivator. I had my daughter, who at the time was about 4 years old. So I had a very, very strong motivation to not be dead in 2 years. So what, you know, me and my husband, we just kind of every day, we didn't make it a spiritual thing. We didn't make it like a ritual thing. Just every day we thought about my lungs healing, and we thought about my daughter being with me. Because at the time, you know, if you're very unable to like function physically, you can't take care of a child. So she was with her father for those few years, unfortunately. So, but that was what every day was like that. Every day my lung is healing, and we're going to get, you know, Emma's going to come and be, you know, we're going to have Emma back, or my daughter. So that took probably about 7 years. And then at the end of that, you know, process, I went back to my doctor, and they did a new x-ray where they could see my lungs, and they're like, the rot is like gone.
Wow.
Like, absolutely, it was gone. Gone.
Amazing.
And she looked at me, she's like, yay, you know.
So,
all right, you
is
know,
it,
so
is it safe to assume that as you were going through those years and visualizing that you were also had the space to overcome maybe any trauma that had happened to you in the past, or things from childhood that kept coming up or that were uncomfortable? Did you have time to go into those? Were they?
No, it wasn't really like that. I mean, because it's kind of hard to explain. Like, I was dealing with a difficult situation, but really my focus was 100% on that.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something people should consider, that instead of trying to dismantle all the bullshit that could have harmed you in the first place, you got to be very patient, pick and choose your battles, and do things one at a time, and put your full attention in a specific task. And that's where I think we did it correctly, because I wasn't trying to fix all this other shit that I had in my, background, emotionally or spiritually or physically or whatever. I put my focus in one thing. So there's also this technique that people will do, like, as a practical thing, right? So there are people who like to multitask, and they'll do several things at once, trying to get several different projects done at once because they want it to be quick. They're excited. They want to get it done. They have all this like inspiration bursting out of them. And I get it. I understand that. That's like totally like the artist way to do things, the creative way to do things, like very. But the problem is that doesn't often work out for people because it fractures people in many different directions. So this is like something that I personally figured out, and like other people have to figure it out, or their experiences might be different.
This is the medicine you bring.
Right. I guess so.
I need this medicine right now, Sarah.
Like because I come from a background where people in my family do that. They multitask in a way that's like not productive or efficient, and they try to get all this shit done because it all needs to get done, but they feel like there's a time limit and there's all this stress and pressure to get it done immediately, when really that's not the case. So I had to learn that I needed to stop splitting my attention to all these different pathways and realize, okay, this is it, this is where I will make lists. I'll make a list of all the things, the shit that needs to get done, right? Stick it on my pin board and be like, task number 1, this needs to get done. Okay. And when that task, and only when that task is done, I'll move to task 2. And then go down the line. And this could take several years. It could take decades. Like I said, the thing with my lungs, that took like 7 years.
Yeah.
7 years. And I was able to do this, but that took a lot. And it took a mindset and me being patient with myself and the things that needed to happen. And all these other things, now I'm on like, task 3 or 4 or whatever it is, for my own personal health. But that's all I'm saying, is that like we fracture ourselves into all these different paths because, I could do that still. Like, I want to write a book. I want to write another book. I want to do this. I want to do this thing. But like, it's not going to go anywhere because I only have so much time in the physical world.
Mm-hmm. So the theme that we had kind of talked about bringing forward, right, is this theme of flow. And as I was thinking about it, I had the awareness that the flow can't exist without some level of containment and structure, or else that flow can become unproductive, like you're saying, or it could be
disorganized,
destructive or disorganized, and so whether it's like you think of emotion or the direction of any kind of energy that has movement and flow, like even the water within ourselves, the emotion, there's a requirement like to have a plan, or to trust a foundation that, or to have like an aqueduct has a containment, right? To direct an energy, to allow the flow like of the healing force, right? Let's say like in your focus of the healing, it's a force that needed a directed like direction and a point at which you're leading to. And if you had just sort of flown it haphazardly through the kind of more feminine mood, emotion, it wouldn't have been as precise and as
exactly. I would have been dead in 2 years. That's what would have happened, because I didn't slow it down and really organize myself. But there's what was I going to say? There's a saying, and I'll think of it again in a minute, but there's a saying that artists have, and I think that's how like creative power is really supposed to work, and like really but there's also another thing I kind of forgot to mention, and then I want to hear you guys talk about it more. But there's a thing like people want to use belief. It's like terminology, I think, can matter. Now, I don't think words really have a lot of power in themselves, but it's about how you emotionally attach yourself to certain words. So I think there is a very big difference between believing something and knowing something. So I think that's also a key ingredient to that kind of process. If people choose to really take this in, I could go this whole time, be like, I really believe I can do it. I'm a champion. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. I believe it. I believe in myself, but what does this really, like, in most of the cases that I have heard, believing doesn't really do a lot of things for people on a large scale, because belief is like a product of doubt in yourself and your capabilities. And doubt is just it's just a product of fear. So it's the fear of failure, really. So I would suggest that when people think about the stuff that we're talking about now, that you don't believe something is going to happen because you're hoping for it. It's going to happen. It's like not even an option that it doesn't happen. Like, so like for me, I was like, my lung is going to heal and my daughter's going to come back and live with me. Like, I know that's going to happen. That's like not even an option.
And you visualized it as healed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the affirmative prayer and this.
Like it was already like that.
Yeah. Which the three of us all have some exposure to that, Ernest Holmes' work and the science of mind. And that affirmative prayer is really about declaring it, so knowing that it is and seeing it as whole and complete, right? Knowing the connection of yourself to the divine and affirming that truth in, with gratitude and visualizing and seeing it as so, and so it is, right? It's that difference in sort, that putting the sword is very, I don't know, strong, and, you plant the stick in the ground, or however you want to see it. It's that backbone. I think that's that masculine energy, and then the love and the care is there so much. Like what drove you to be alive for your child, right? Is based, like, ultimately love drove that and wrapped around that masculine pole to the center point of, the truth of your divine nature, right? It's like pretty magical, but accessible to us all because it operates on principles. Nature, right?
And with the kind of tone I take generally in life, I'm just like, that's just how it's gonna be. Like, there ain't no question for me. Like, so now, like, I used to be very much into the mindset of fracturing myself. And, people will ask me, like, how do you get all this shit done? And I'm like, I don't fracture myself. I take my time. And they're like, that doesn't even make sense. I'm like, well, it kind of does, if you look at it backwards, I guess. So
You're reminding me of, you're touching on so many things right now that I'm like, gotta want to hit on, gotta ping on.
Go for it, yeah.
But one of the, I like to bring things down to like as basic as we can, and I feel like what you're talking about is the difference between believing, which is in the head, and in knowing, which is in the body. And that's kind of the way I would say that like my spiritual gifts work, is like I can tune into something, I can think about this trajectory of the future, and then my body is the one that tells me if like it's aligned for me or not. And rather than thinking like, okay, I believe that this is going to happen and I want this to happen and I believe I'm going to be there, because that's just, I can feel the discordance. Like doesn't feel like that's going to happen, whatever that thing is. But then I tune in and I ask my body, and then there's a knowing, right? So that kind of feels like the difference between the thinking and the knowing, which is totally and 100,000% exactly what human design is offering us. There's many, 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 many layers to this modality, but at its most practical, it's how to know your more nuanced intuition and how to learn how to go with the flow, how the universe and your energy work together. And so each individual person is going to have, that we're all so unique and so different. Our energy runs so different. How could the same thing work for each person? So for you, like I wonder if you're a generator, because generators are very more thorough. Like they will do things more steadily at an even pace. Generators feel really good when they're focusing on one thing for a long time and then go really deep into that thing. Where manifesting generators, it's another category of a generator, but they have a direct connection to their throat and expression, and there's a lot of quickness that goes with them. So like an example would be one of my friends who has like 4 businesses, and everyone thinks he's crazy, but that's how he operates, and he loves it, and he's joyous, and he's happy, and he's doing all the things, and everything gets done. He's a little spastic, but
yeah, but he can manage it, and that's the difference.
Yeah, and
we're all different.
Way.
Yeah. And I tell people that we're all different. We're not all the same cookie cutter, and we're not supposed to be. And that's one of the things like in the truth seeker movement that kind of really, gets me all worked up. Sometimes it shouldn't, because I'm like, no, dude. But like people like to cookie cutter how we are supposed to be. Like, and I'm not talking about like morality or ethics or the principles of reality. I'm talking about like how we are manifesting and experiencing in the physical as the creative stewards of that fraction of that, creator above, like however people want to identify that as. It never really matters to me. I usually call it source, but we're all different, and we're all supposed to be experiencing this reality in personal, private ways, so that we can all make it to the same finish line. That's how I kind of see that myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And from my experience, there's using these blueprints, whether it be your natal astrology chart or your human design body graph, these can be really helpful tools for you to contemplate. And like, oh, it's usually really validating. Oh, that has been my experience. I do gravitate towards doing things that way. This makes so much sense. I have had those intuitive hits, and when I didn't listen, I was really frustrated, So yeah, there's definitely something to that. I tend to see patterns in things, and so it was undeniable. Like I couldn't put this stuff down once I started to see the patterns in people and in energies. And that's where it comes back to energetics again. There's the energetic of Mars, the archetype, we're working within these archetypes. And I don't know if these archetypes are constructed onto us in this 3D material plane, or if they develop naturally out of whatever, but they're there, and they're depicted through mythology. They're depicted through astrology.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, like our ancients had a lot to do with energy. I mean, they called it energy magic or whatever they called it, but they were really just using energy technology, the same as this. Like, so like it's funny how like you think about like the ancients and how they use that, and I think they did use it a lot more than we're being told, especially in the archaeological world is like another one of those fields where they like keep it cookie cutter. Mm-hmm. And they're like, you can't go outside of this or it like breaks the fabric of reality or whatever dramatic thing they think. But yeah.
Kavalya, how does your understanding of like Vedic texts and, you know, some of the goddess lineages that you know, fit into any of this? Does anything come to mind?
Well, the Vedas are going to be different than, well, I mean, there's stories, but like, yeah, there's archetypes in the Mahabharata, right? And these bigger stories inside of a bigger book of the Vedas, and there's 4 different Vedas. And I wouldn't say that that's necessarily like someplace that I study at this point. My, you know, knowing of them and knowing that there's certain books that we study, like the Bhagavad Gita or the Sri Ram Bhagavata, I can't say that word right now. I haven't said that in a while, but in the Mahabharata, like these stories come out of that, and they are archetypal stories as well that teach us lessons about morality and working with good and evil, you know, within ourselves. I think a lot of these stories have to do with the battle within, and and how that can play out and how we overcome, or even just have to deal with what is handed to us. You know, we want to control things. I'm thinking of Arjuna and his conversation with Krishna, with the Lord, and he's just like, I'm supposed to like kill my family in this like war. That why are we even doing this war? Like, I don't even want to be a part of this, you know? And it's just kind of about, well, there's God's will versus your will. And if you're trying to go resist everything that's happening to you, you're going to have resistance and feel like have negative emotions around it or unhelpful emotions around it, you know, where we kind of sometimes just need to surrender to the larger will and let go of our will and all of the stories and beliefs and things that are behind that. Yeah. You know, the other thing about belief I always think is funny is that the word lie is right in the middle of belief.
Yeah. Yeah.
It also seems.
Go on, Leslie.
Also seems like a lot of the ancient teachings and this idea of flow and containment, like, are working with a gender principle, right? That's coming. That's an ancient teaching, right? And seems to have a formula in a sense, or a guidance around the use of those principles.
Yeah.
Right?
So to go back to your question, just to talk about that for a second, you know, I always there's a lot about us living in a dualistic world, as within, so without, as above, so below. We have an inner world, we have our outer senses. In yoga, it's often depicted as Purusha. This is old classic yoga philosophy. Purusha and Prakriti. And Prakriti is anything that moves, anything at all, even our thoughts. And Purusha is just the consciousness, like just that like straight connection with nothing interfering. It's so interesting that Purusha is also the word they use for man. So if you like go to the bathroom and it's the men's room, it's like Purusha. Yeah, so strange. But the other thing about, if you take that same idea into Tantra, this idea of polarity, there's obviously Shakti, which is the divine feminine, and the archetypes of those are many goddesses that depict different aspects of the divine feminine, different aspects of God. And then there's Shiva, and Shiva is that pure consciousness, right? That containment, because Shakti energy in all of its movement and wildness and electricity and movement needs to be contained. Like you were saying, Sarah, we take the container, even like the own process of our masculine self, tapping into that with our mental piece and creating a container for that attention and that intention to flow, because the energy flow, we need to direct it. Otherwise it's just right all over the place.
A conductor, right?
I can't tell you how many men have used against me, I can count on one hand, but a bunch, that fact that, oh, well, if you look at Kali, she's standing on the man's chest and has cut the heads off the men. And I'm just like, that's not it. You're missing it.
And also like
ego, right?
Yeah. Like also like stop using like somebody's subjective art depiction to understand a concept. Like that's like people do that with me all the time too, and I'm like, it's just a piece of art. It doesn't matter.
It has symbolic representation.
I mean, it has symbolic. Yeah, like art is like a message. If it's used properly, it's a message we portray to the world. There's a lot of symbology in it. But like, you know, sometimes people are just depicting things like in kind of very creative, outside of the realm of what the concept is actually supposed to be about. So then people get false ideas. Yeah, like you can't like see the tree for the wood, you know, and I think that's a big problem with this as well. Like, you know, that's the same thing, like with not fracturing yourself, you have to see, like, instead of having all these little tasks you have to get done, and instead of rushing and trying to like maintenance the entire forest, focus on one tree first and then move to the next tree when that tree is grown, you know, if that helps people at all. But yeah.
And that's the kind of the zoom in quality, right, that's needed, I think, to focus, achieve that more masculine energy. And then there's the zoom out, right, to see the big picture and all the patterns, right? And so you can't really get your sewing project done if you're out, you know, dealing with the whole picture. You know, there's a need to pick the project and zoom in to do that in the context of like where you are in space and time and why you're doing it, right? I don't know, it's interesting balance of energies. Hey, Britt, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, we got Brittany joining us, so we're like having a great conversation about energy. Well, I guess energy distortion and energy functionality.
Yeah.
It was awesome to jump in where I did. I loved jumping in and hearing some of the Vedic and Hindu, I guess, references. So that's something that I really follow. And yeah, just going with the flow too. So gentle upgrade, hopefully, on audio and lighting right now, but we'll see how it goes.
I think so. I do. I see it.
Nice.
Looks great. Sounds great.
Well, where I'm like, I keep gravitating toward, and what's been in my mind a lot, just observing so many of us in this modern day, is like how distracted we are. How distracted we are by our phones, by so much information coming at us. And yes, some people have better boundaries with that than others, but it becomes this habit that creeps in. Because just a few years ago, I wasn't using my phone like I am now, but the habit has just accumulated and accumulated and accumulated, and to the point where like, now I always know where my phone is, where I would like leave my phone for a day and be like, oh, I'll get back to it, you know? So this level of distraction that we live in, how quickly it seems that everything is kind of moving these days. And going back to like our own energy, I have this feeling that like, yes, we are going through a quickening. Look at the technology. I think as we enter this age of Aquarius, which rules technology, and the future, I think it's going to, like, a lot of stuff is going to start rolling out more with AI. And how do we, as these old human bodies, how are we going to keep up with all of this that's happening? And I think that we're being forced to by just the natural quickening of things, but also to remember how important it is to sit and ground, to sit and focus and be in oneself. Kind of reminded me, Sarah, back to what you were saying earlier. There's something there. But yeah, I've been contemplating this a lot because I find myself distracted. I find myself then not being able to focus and get something truly done and give myself grace with like the timing and everything. But I want to talk more about the Kundalini practice, but after anyone has anything else to say about that.
I would only just say with what you're talking about, and then we could move on. Like with the AI stuff and, you know, the advancement going really fast, like we're kind of being forced into it, which I think is an entirely unnatural thing to be taking place. And I do think it is being forced upon us. And I think it is unwise personally that, like, I don't have anything against technology or even AI as a concept. Mm-hmm. The problem is that there's too many people who want to rely on it immediately to do everything for them, or at least, you know, no human intervention into the process. They think it's the answer to like human slavery and all. I've heard all kinds of things, and I'm like, you don't get it. Like, in the way I see it, like, generally speaking, for the most part, humanity is not grown up enough to be able to handle this amount of quick-paced technology building. It's not natural, and like we're not grown up enough, or the majority of us are not grown up enough to utilize it in a adult way. Because some of the things that some people have said, not everybody uses AI this way. Like some people are actually using it for the tool it is. But, you know, that's why I think it was introduced first with like art and music and writing, because it's a very subtle, under the radar thing. And if we can force people to accept AI to do all art, all writing, all music, that is where you kill that spark in the individual as a creative fraction of spirit to actually feel motivated or want to feel motivated to express in an individual way, if that makes sense. That's like really my problem with it, is that's why like the art world is under attack, and it has been under attack because of this problem. So like that's why I think, like, I mean personally, like I'm with you with the phones, Kavalya. Like it's a distraction device. Like, I mean, I'd be totally cool if we all went back to landlines and beepers. Like, I'm like, I'd be fine with that. Like, I don't care. Like, it's fine. We have computers, we have tablets. Like, we don't need our phones to do all the shit either. Like, it's supposed to be a communication device, right? Let's like all switch to walkie-talkies.
It's like, amazing Jesus. How much it costs. Like,
yeah.
About, you know, a landline in the day, you know, maybe you paid, I don't know, $40 a month or something, you know, and now it's like if you have a family and everyone has a phone, or, you know, you're spending hundreds of dollars. Yeah. And then you become dependent on it. And somehow we've all adjusted our to spend all this money on this device that, you know, it's just really weird.
Yeah. I think I remember something that you touched on, Sarah, now was about more of like a human technology. And I think that's where I want to go with this for a second, is that with the advancement, this is what the Aquarian age from some people have talked about, is like there's a human advancement and a technological advancement, but there's also this human technology that we have kind of lost, either in a reset or something. The knowledge is not fully out there, that we have these inner technologies and these inner capabilities to communicate with each other, right? If we're open energetically and don't have a lot of distraction, like we can telepathically communicate. And I'm sure we have in the past. I think without all these EMF fields and all this distortion in our field, in the air and the firmament, where all these things, like everything was so much clearer. Everything was so much clearer. We don't even recognize the level of like buzzingness that we live around sometimes, unless you live way out in the woods and you're blessed to do that. But that reminds me of the Kundalini practice, because this was kind of all talked about 40, 50 years ago when the person, I'm not even going to say his name, started this and brought it to the West, is that there's going to be a quickening. And one of the mantras is keep up. And so when we keep up and work on ourselves, work on our energy, open up our higher faculties, like not only we're going to be stretching in two directions, the technology, and then we're also going to be back into the human technology. And I see people wanting to do both right now, right? Get back to the land and then go to the computers and go to the cities. It's kind of like a split. Yeah.
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I kind of see it as more, instead of a split, an integration. So I don't live in the woods, but I do live in the sticks, and I have a small town, which is actually big for around here. And like Cash is very alive, and those kind of more old school values of like wanting a more simple life before all this technology exploded, that is still very much alive. But we do have this advancement in technology, and it is here whether we want it to be or not. And so, you see a lot of the technology use with the phones, but I would say out here, where at least where I'm at, I think people do use it more as a tool. I'm sure as a distraction too, because we've all experienced that with our devices to some degree, like, there goes 2 hours, crap. Like I didn't get this done because I was doing whatever I was doing on my phone. But it's coming. So I think that there will probably be a way. I think if people can use it in a healthy way, where it is truly a tool, it's truly something that is just, you need this information, you go to this certain place, you get it, but you bring it back into the real life. I think a lot of people are using technology as a distraction from living. And we were all born here for a reason, okay? And life is part of that. So we need to be present. We need to be bringing in the information that we learn and making it practical and applicable, I think. A lot of people just keep putting information in, but they don't do anything with it, So at least out here, I think there's a pretty decent balance, but I do think that will probably be a struggle in the future to come is, people being so distracted, their life falls apart because they weren't present enough to take care of their home or their family or whatever. I do think we're going to see some effects from this kind of a cause, but hopefully, there's some of us who can use it a little more responsibly and just as a tool. I guess we will see.
And that links to, Kavalya's point about being embodied, right? And then understanding our body and how it is a reflection of the,
internal.
The internal and how we are dealing with the energy, that's coming at us from the outside, how we're responding to it, what we're doing with it, what we're doing with the emotions, whether we're shutting them down and compartmentalizing them, whether we're allowing them to be felt and flowed out of, through us, whether we are engaged in, the physical aspects of our maintenance in our body, right? Or just all up in our head and, living life through VR glasses. Yeah.
That's a scary thought for me. Like you're going to live, but in another reality, just you're not going to clean your room because you're in this world instead.
Yeah. And that might as well be living in fantasy. And living in fantasy is ultimately just another slave collar. But like what you were saying, Britt, yeah,
We're
like
not.
what you were, right, yeah. And like what you were saying, Brittany, like about people using it just to like take over the full aspects of their world where that's all that it is. That like that's what I would see the opposite side of the polarity of like instead of being able to healthy, task yourself and be patient, do things one at a time, don't fracture yourself. I would say the opposite of that isn't, you put everything together and you're trying to get everything done. The opposite is just not doing anything at all. That's how so yeah, I just was thinking about that. So that's a good point, Brittany, to bring up. Thank you.
What came to me was if we don't have a practice being present with ourselves first, how do we know how to be truly present with anyone or anything and have mindfulness around it,
Yeah. And there are people who I think there's and maybe you would know more a little bit about this, Kavalya, but is that how you pronounce your name? Kavalya?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
I think that there are more people out there than is realized or even acknowledged. People who are empaths naturally, like psychically, a little bit more on the right. There's like the regular, I think we all have this like capability to be slightly like empathic or psychic or whatever. But I think there are tiers to it as well. And like, I think there's a lot more. I think it's a very natural thing for human beings to be empathic, like in a kind of more of a psychic way where like we feed off of each other in that way. And being empathic, like if you were to define that in the physical world, they would say it's about you can feel other people's energy, other people's emotions, other people's strife, other people's illness. You can put like it's a skill, right? It's a talent. And so I think there's a lot more people out there who are actually able to do that. But because of the world we live in and how we're being we've got a lot of burden on us as far as conditioning from the industry in our physical world, the medical industry even a lot turns off a lot of our psychic capability, like it shuts it down, like and a lot of the technology, and especially the technology, radio waves like 5G and 4G and with the phones and stuff like this. There's actually been studies about phones and how the energy works with the body in negative ways. So it shuts down certain capabilities that we have on a psychic type of level. So I don't know if you've gone much into this topic at all, but I find that people who have a higher frequency to be empathic, like in that kind of way where they can pick up on you really quickly, like what's going on inside, they get very sick a lot faster and easier because they have all of this weighing down on them from like the parasite class creating this like toxic environment that we're in. And it creates an illness where they're just sick all the time. I know like a lot of people, like they don't believe in this stuff, but I'm like, you're a fucking empath. Yeah. With the way you talk, you are clearly an empath. Yeah. But they don't even believe that that's a real thing. They just think they are sick. And they just think they're chronically ill. Like, no, that's not a thing. I just have cancer. That's it. But they don't understand that. The reason
I definitely have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, like I've seen it so many times. Like, there's like I do think there is a difference between naturally occurring physical realm. Nature's just gonna like be wild card playing a wild card sometimes, and people get genuinely ill from natural avenues. But I think more of the sickness that we have is generated because of our toxic environment, and it's killing our abilities to integrate our empathic traits so that we cannot deal with these things properly, if that makes sense. So I don't know, like, I'd like to hear if that even made any kind of sense.
I have a lot of popping in my head. Is that okay? Okay. So, well, it reminded me, one of like the work I do is, you know, I'm a social worker, a therapist. So I've spent, you know, the last 30 plus years around people in various states of emotional distress and dealing with people who are suicidal and so forth. So this experience of empathy is very, it's a tool, right, of my work. And very early on, I was like a student in a school site, and my supervisor was gone for the day, and I got inundated with like kids with all these intense issues, and I didn't really have the experience to properly contain my time, you know, with each of these kids that were flowing through. And by the time I got to this one girl, emotionally, I was not super well grounded. And a young girl came in who was very suicidal. And she was telling me all the reasons why she should kill herself. And I remember getting empathically, like, very connected to her and her story, to the point where I was like blended with it. I kind of merged, and I felt her in such a way that I believed. It was like everything she was saying, like, I felt to the degree that I didn't have the counter to her intention, you know. And I caught myself as I was starting to like sink into that and like feel helpless as her, and hopeless. And I had to like remind myself, you know, what I was doing, what my role, and like pull myself out, right? So my lesson for this, really, as for my career and everything, is like empathy needs a container as well. Empathy needs a balance. It's like you know, if you want to, the emotion itself, we want to call it a feminine force, you know, the flow, the water, the power. It is like, and it is necessary, you know, part of our manifesting technology, right? You know, but if it's left contained, I guess that's just the word, or, you know, it is going to not it'll drown. We can drown in it, you know, in such a way. So what is it with this energy of the emotion also can be blocked. It can be stuck in our energy field, our biofield. The work of Eileen McCusick is really fascinating, where she's discovered this energy field, which is like that energy bubble I was talking about, that the South American Pacos identify as this bubble of energy. It's like our aura, you know, this 6 feet, circumference, this radius that we have around us, where we can kind of expand our energy and blend and touch other people's energy bubbles, or we can pull it in. And it's this energetic process of protection through that energy field, right? And so what happens is, if we don't allow the processing of emotion, and they get stuck in the body related to our energy centers, and that can create illness and disease and, you know, chronic conditions. So this connection between unprocessed or over, like not processing emotion effectively, is most definitely attached and connected to our physical symptoms and illnesses. And there's talking of human technology, if we learn our technology, we can learn how to clear and move that energy and unstick it, right? So that we are not getting sick, or we can reverse illness and things like that potentially. But what you bring up, Sarah, is really interesting about like the dark, you know, I don't want to say dark technologies, but I want to say like malevolent technologies being used against us to clog us up, to over inundate our energy system with garbage, with toxins, whether it's food or air or emotional crap, that's being stirred up through media and, things that we are exposed to, right? That how do we keep a pure vessel when all of that is just like bombarding us? And how do we develop practices to move that energy and clear our field, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we backtrack a little bit? Could I share some slides? Because as you were talking about taking stuff on, I want to show you visually in human design how they organize that information on how each of us individually might take stuff on in certain areas with certain themes. Would that be possible?
Yeah. I think that would be very useful for people to get more of a visualization.
Yeah, let's see.
I wonder if I could just add you as hold on.
Let's see if it will let me.
Oh, look at that. You got it.
Is that working? Okay, let's see if I can make this bigger. And do you see the whole thing, or are we?
I see. Yeah, I can see
okay,
the slides inside your program.
But not anymore.
I know.
Not anymore.
I don't know what happened. Where'd it go? Well, am I unsharing? Am I unshared right now?
Not sharing.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me bring it up, and then I'll get right there because I had it ready.
Sometimes visualization really helps people really see what you're talking about. So I think that's always useful.
So let's share, and I'll present, and we can do a presenter view, I hope. Okay, got it.
Ow, kitty, stop. Oh, crazy cat.
He just wants to be part of the video, Leslie.
Every once in a while I move in a way that makes her mad, and then she attacks me. It's just crazy.
Okay. Well, let's see here.
We had it up. It's not up again.
I know, I'll do it right now.
And just for FYI, Kavalya, Brittany is pretty well versed in Vedic astrology.
That's cool. That is not all of my. I'm into evolutionary astrology, and I would love to learn more about the Vedic. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
So you're looking at a human design body graph. And human design, this information that shows up here is the same information you would put in for your natal birth chart, your birth time, your birth date, the place, and the time is pretty important to get the exact time. And it gives you, here they call it your definition. So we're always all of the astrology chart, we're always all of the human design body graph, but what you have defined, which would be these things here that you see colored in, versus these open centers that they're called, that are white, these are considered undefined. The defined centers, it's said that you own, where the undefined centers, you actually take in energy from the collective and amplify it out. And because we each have our own unique design and setup of this definition, the themes of the centers might really resonate with the person. So for me, a lot of people, like the very top center you see here is called the head center. And this is somewhat similar to, it's the Eastern chakra system, the Indian chakra system, Hindu. It's also part I Ching, part Western astrology. And if you were to flip this whole body graph upside down, you can see it looks like a Kavalya tree of life. So it's kind of incorporating all of these different ways and modalities, ways of organizing information all together. So here, where we have things that are open, these are also the same places that can be very conditioned by the outside world. So here at the head, there is a not self theme for any center that you have open. And the head represents inspiration, how we get inspiration. But the not self theme for this is thinking about things that don't matter. And am I trying to answer everyone else's questions? So this is how we would work with the theme of an open center, is you just check in with yourself. With people with an open head here, an open ajna center, which is the next one down, which could be correlated to your third eye center. These are, it's a lot of thoughts running through your mind that may feel like confusion, that may feel like doubt, that may feel like just like mental pressure. And we have to realize like they're actually not all ours. We are picking up stuff. We're picking up stuff from all around us, the people that we're close to, societal conditioning, the people that we grew up around. Where we have openness is where we're more susceptible to conditioning, if that makes sense.
That's super interesting. And so when you have that open center, how do you counterbalance the risks of that, right? What are there practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's awareness around that, and there's questions for each of the open centers. Like I said, it's like, am I thinking about things that don't matter? Check in. Right? Journaling about it can start to unfold layers and layers of what that might look like for you. And then if you have any definition, like I have this is actually my chart. I'm a pure generator. There's this little definition, this little tiny hanging gate, it's called, right here. And that is the gate of confusion. And how that's shown up for me is that in my younger years, having all of this openness and just racing thoughts all the time and loving information. I have a Gemini moon. I love information. I love to talk about information back and forth, but I was often confused and the answers weren't there. So I would shame myself. I would be really upset with myself that I didn't have the answer. Why am I confused? And it would lead to feelings of shame. Well, when I learned this modality, and one of the first places I looked at was like, oh, what's that little thing in the head right there? And it was the gate of confusion. I recognized the mental pictures, all the things flashing. Confusion is part of my process. It's part of it. Because the head center is also a pressure center, just like at the bottom, that bottom square down there, the root center. These are pressure centers that pressurize the whole system. And they act as like a pulse. So when we have an open center, the pulse is either there or it's not there. In this case, the knowing is either there or it's not there. And there's no amount of thinking that you can do to make the answer show up. The answer's in the body. And then when you get clarity, it comes up in the thinking. When you finally get clarity, it's like, oh, there it is. So once I just took all the pressure off myself, and I was like, I'm going to go with the flow of what my mind's doing. I'm going to let it do its process. And I trust that the answer is coming in the right timing. And I kid you not, it does every time. There's no worrying about it.
That's actually interesting that you put it that way because, yeah, I mean, I can relate to that because sometimes I will be, when I'm trying to, figure out how to do something, I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck this is. But then I go through this like process of like, I could not do this if I tried. And then I go through this process of like, okay, yeah, now it's starting to come up. But like sometimes that takes several months for me. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but that's like really interesting. Like, I don't know really much about human design, this kind of information. So I'm like really fascinated with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, just these kind of basic concepts there's so much to this, but just this practical things of like, oh, I'm taking an energy with these themes and then I'm amplifying it. Like with an open throat, this third center down, this square right here, what kind of looks like where the throat would be. I only have one definition. an open throat. Right? I can talk about things in a multitude of ways. I don't have a defined, like I only talk about things this way. I only express this way, I only have one little bit of definition in there. A lot of beautiful singers, a lot of famous singers have open throats, right? They're just channeling energy. So yeah, it's really interesting. When you were talking about the spleen and talking about picking up even fears or sicknesses from other people, this is what an open spleen will do. And it governs your immune system, survival instincts, everything that's in the now. And having an open spleen is like, the gift is like, you can tell when you're getting sick immediately. It's like, oh, my immune system is run down. Where somebody with a defined spleen, it might take them a little longer to recognize that they're getting sick, because we have this openness here, but I also recognize I can take on, right, a feeling of sickness or something from someone else very easily. So this is kind of how those would work. If that makes sense.
It's interesting. What do the solid ones mean and the colors?
Yeah, so this would be my specific definition. This is called the G center here, this yellow diamond at the center. This is our sacral center. This is a really important one to know if you wanted to do anything with human design, because the generators and manifesting generators have this definition, and this is all about energy. It's like a battery. We can get up, we can do the same thing every day. We have more consistent energy. For people who have an undefined sacral center, those would be your manifestors, your reflectors, and your projectors. They do not have consistent energy. They really don't. They need a lot of rest. They need a lot of downtime. And not that we don't, as generators need rest and downtime too. It just shows up differently. We can go and go and go. The end need a break, and it just shows up a little bit differently. Does that help? This is the emotional center. Everything that's in the now has to do with the spleen and our emotions, right? They're waves of emotion. So getting clarity through the emotional center, you have to wait for clarity. You have to wait for the emotional wave to go up. You have to wait for the emotional wave to go down. And the idea is that if you have an emotional authority being your more nuanced intuition in this modality, you have to wait for time for those emotions to clear and then make a decision. Because if you make a decision at the high end or the low end of the emotional wave, it's really not going to bring you'll be frustrated most likely. And then this last one down here is the root center. And this is more about adrenalized pressure. It has to do with stress. It has to do with the feelings of something always needing to get done. Yeah, so definitions are things that you own, a little more consistent energy here. And with the openness, it's a little bit more, it's inconsistent and you're taking it on from others.
So with the open centers, you take in from the outside and then you process it, or does it automatically, it amplifies out like a bouncing off of you in a way?
I would say it's both of those, yeah, because if you're taking in other people's thoughts here at the Ajna Center, and there's just a lot of thinking, a lot of conceptualizing, a lot of that going on, then yeah, you're taking it on, and then you're amplifying someone else's stuff.
Right. And so if you own your energy centers, like the more colored ones, then does that mean that you're less in those areas, less suggestible, I guess, from outside energies, more possibly rigid?
I don't know about rigid, but I would say yes to your question.
Do you mean
suggestible?
Yeah, do you mean maybe more vulnerable, Leslie? Because that's what I was thinking about. You're maybe less vulnerable in those areas.
Well, I was thinking it's probably has both sides of the coin, right. That there's, you can receive when you're open, but if you're not aware that it's not you, then that's, somewhat risky, that what you're amplifying. And through awareness, you can become more aware, but if it's, kind of rooted in you, then I'm just imagining that then you're less influenced, but perhaps, and is that like a deeper maybe connection to self, I guess? I'm trying to understand like the pros and cons or the benefits, how you work with that, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm thinking outside of the actual human design paradigm. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer it with any other verbiage than I already offered.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an aspect of osmosis there, of course. Obviously, that some of it is us. We just have there's more of a tendency to be conditioned by the outside world within the themes of what you have open. So here's another body graph. This would be somebody who's a projector. They do not have that sacral center definition. See, it's undefined. And undefined emotional, so they're picking up the emotions from the people around them and amplifying it. And I know this with my younger son. He has an open emotional center around a bunch of people with defined emotional centers. So if we get emotional, he immediately just flares up. If we're angry, he'll slam the door. It's very exacerbated through him. That's one example.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
And in terms of him having like these defined higher centers, how does that express?
Yeah, as a person with an open head and an open ajna, these two up here, when I get around people who have definition here, it feels almost like so relieving to me that the mental pressure can just relax, because they offer such a more consistent way of expressing their concepts or their ideas. It just feels more consistent. It almost kind of feels like home. It's like, oh, I can sink into that. If you resonate with the person well, like this happens to be a friend of mine. And when we get together, it feels just so nice. They fill you up in a sense, which is interesting. It kind of feels like a magnet, if you will.
So I have a question. I don't know if it, matters or pertains to this, but I'm just wondering where it's all white on these pathways. Are, these sections of it, are they just like untapped avenues of things that could be worked on, or are they just the structure of who you are? Or are they things that can be developed in, I don't know, through whatever your individual growth is?
Yes.
Like, can this change?
Yeah. Yeah. And like I can use the idea of our astrology chart is like, that's the picture of our time at birth, right? And then we are growing every moment we're alive, we're growing up and out of that. So it's still relevant, it's still applicable, it's still part of our baseline blueprint, but obviously we mature and things change. And we also have free will. We can choose to, if we're looking here at the chart, and we can choose to say tap into gate 54 down here, learn what the theme is and how, like, oh, I would like to work with that. Yeah, because we're the whole thing always. But our specific definition, our specific blueprint is a bit more in the defined pieces. So you might feel a pull when you have a hanging gate like this. You might feel a pull to the themes of the connection of what the next theme might be with that upper gate, right? You might then choose to, oh, I'm feeling like I'm struggling a little bit in this area. That's interesting that these are the themes of these gates. I'm going to read this, and how can then I work to build more awareness around that I'm only working with this part when I'd like to be working with the whole channel. So you absolutely can tap into those pieces. And I'll use the gate 4323 here as an example because I have this in my chart. So the whole channel, which would be like what you see here, this full channel that leads from one center to the next, that is called a channel, and then a hanging gate is the little mini piece. So there's always going to be that kind of magnetic pull towards the part that is not defined. In this case, it's the 23, where this person has the 43. This is the design from the Ajna Center, from our concepts, our processes, our ideas to the throat, and how well we can articulate what we're thinking about. And when you have a gap there, there might be a struggle to take all that you can conceptualize and bring it out into a way where people resonate with it and they'll receive it. So this channel is called From Genius to Freak, because when you come up with these, they call them mutative thoughts, these mutative ideas, these new concepts, people might think you're a genius, or they might think you're a freak. And right now, everyone has this 23 defined. I think it's where the placement of the planet Uranus is right now. So everyone now has this 23 defined, which means this would be connected for this person. And I feel it very connected for me. Like, I'm able to sit here and express these kind of really heady concepts right now, because this definition is flowing, where a year ago, when this was not flowing and I have that break right there, it was much more challenging for me to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it interacts with the astrology of the universe, essentially. There's an interaction.
Yeah. And with people too, like I said about the magnet of the head, if I get someone around someone who has the 23, they might bring that out of me a bit more. And that's so interesting, right? We have these different energetics with people. As we know, we meet people, we have a connection about that, or in this way, and another person, it's totally different.
And so we come together, in different kind of balances, then that magnifies or amplifies actually our ability to produce, I guess, together. We produce more together.
Yeah. So I would love to just say real quick, the generators are the builders, we're the doers. There's 70% generators and manifesting generators in the world, and we're like the builders. We're here to have consistent energy and like actually do the physical work. And we're here to do what we love to do, because if everyone else besides us has an open sacral center and we're not enjoying what we do, then we're bringing them that energy of not enjoyment, and then they're amplifying that out into the world. So we're the builders. This here is the projector. They're about 25% of the population. And the projectors are here as guides. They're really great teachers. A lot of teachers in this human design world are projectors. They are here to guide the generating energy. They ask great questions for the generating energy to respond to. They are often very like pokey. They kind of project, their aura projects into people, so they have to kind of wait for the invitation. They build their value, they get good at what their expertise is, and then we call them in as an expertise, or we call them in for what they're good at. The next piece would be the manifestors, and these are like the old kings and queens, the ancient warriors. They are like, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this. They're more the directing energy, or the urge. They have an urge to start something new, and they have all these people underneath them to like get the things done. In that analogy, the projector would be like the middle manager. And then lastly, we have the reflector. And I don't have a picture of a reflector, but if you could picture this body graph with none of these centers defined, everything is open. They almost act like a barometer for whatever community they're in. They reflect the health of the community that they're in, because they're taking in everything everywhere, and they're kind of amplifying all of that out. So they can be very bright, they can be very light, they need a lot of time alone, but in an ideal world, you have each one of these energy types to work together to create.
That's actually really cool. Like it's almost like a network.
Yeah.
Of how to function in a community and maybe a healthy way and grow that way. And I think it's kind of hopeful too to hear this kind of stuff, because I find I feel like a lot of people look at this type of information and they think it's very set in stone and they get very like this with it, with the information, and they don't allow the possibility that it can expand. So I think it's kind of hopeful too that if you've got the right kind of elements in a community, you can really create a very healthy, constructive, effective community when you work together instead of dividing yourself over very like stupid or really just nonsensical things. Like it's just, and people do that. I think that's part of the, the external toxic environment problem there. It's, that's another thing that I've talked about is like, if people looked at the story of Babel, of the Tower of Babel, and really looked at that as like a divisive tool against people, it's like a tactic. So I think it would be interesting if, to study this stuff in a way where it's like, an expanding kind of science within the self and with the community instead of against it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That's what I'm reading.
Yeah. The value of the individual and then the power of the collaboration or the coming together with all of our strengths and diversity, right? And making an effect in the world. Like we need all of us and our different unique designs, right? And astrology is very similar too, right? And
yeah, it doesn't offer the practical advice, and we're not going to have time to get into that, what that is today for each energy type. There's very practical advice, and like, this is how you do the experiment. Try this out. Try this strategy out for your energy type for 3 or 6 months and see if anything changes, right? I talk a lot with Leslie about doing the experiments in our own life, the experiment of our own life, and see what does work for us and what doesn't, and take that does.
Yeah, I actually, sorry, Leslie, really quick. That makes me think that people should use this study, like get a notebook and then like every month or every quarter or something, do like a new work up on yourself of where you are on that chart and see if it actually evolves over like the course of a year or something like that, or a couple of years, and see, because that's, it seems like a study that you don't just go and you like do a workup once, like maybe you do it several times in a lifetime to see how you actually move forward. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does the energy, does the design literally, how would we measure whether our energy systems have changed, right? Is there a way to do that?
I don't know. I'm so flowy.
Yeah, it's an interesting question though, right?
I don't write things down. I just experiment. I mean, I journal, but I don't really go back to
measure it in that kind of way.
I guess I measure my growth by the quality of the relationships in my life.
Yeah.
How sticky my life feels, right? And how easily I'm able to move away from what doesn't feel good anymore.
Yeah, the energy feeling blocked, right, would be a sign of, something not being in alignment, or, the flow is blocked. What I like about this is it gives you sort of a template to work with that gives direction to that which you can focus on again, to feel the to understand and be more forgiving of oneself. Let's say if something doesn't happen the way it does for someone else, right? to know when maybe you want to be around another person and what person's energy will provide the thing you need, right?
That's kind of what I was going to say is, Brittany, we started talking about originally, like Sarah was like, well, what do you do? And I was like, well, behind everything I do, all I do is energetics, you know, and that's kind of like, we can feel, and like we're talking so heady about this, right? But like we can feel what feels right. If we can have any practices to sit with ourselves and develop that more nuanced intuition, develop that knowing within ourselves, possibly with the guidance of human design. It does talk a lot about your individual intuition. You can play with that. You can do that experiment, but yeah, to just keep dropping out of the head. Like we can all take a big deep breath right now and just like sink into any sense that you feel in the body. And the more that we do that, the more I think we develop the ability to be both like talking about something and feeling at the same time. I think maybe yoga teaching has helped me to really develop that, because I have to feel what's going on in my body and I have to talk about it with the class at the same time.
It's interesting commentary about technology, right? And how we're doing so much on a platform like this where we're apart. And I think that leads to more of a heady experience, you know, because we're talking about, and like if you were doing a class with us in person, I know that you wouldn't be just letting us stay in our head, right? You would be engaging us in our bodies and in experiential things. So it's a good reminder for us all to balance out the screen time.
Yeah. And, you know, the lady who came with me this morning, I did a little workshop like this specifically on human design with a small group of people. And I was tired and I was a little frazzled and like had some personal stuff going on that she was like talking to me about. And I got there and I dropped in, and she said to me, you know, like, I was really like impressed in how you held the space, and that you weren't just like talking about the logical stuff, and that like you brought us into our bodies, and like you were there with us. And I was just like, wow. Yeah. Thank you for telling me that. It felt really nice. But yeah, inner and outer, up and down, all the balance.
So I think I'm needing to wind down a little bit. I've got some tugging on me. So, yeah. And then Kavalya, you have about a limited amount of time as well. So
yeah.
Yeah, I think we've I mean, because we could totally do this again, because I'm sure there's just like mountains and mountains of information people can take in about this kind of topic. And so thank you for like talking about it, because it sounds more like a science to me. Like I tend to look at things very sometimes clinically. Mm-hmm. So I find like it makes sense the way you're talking about it, because it's very like, well, this is like a science.
Yeah.
So that's how it's translating to me. And I think, if people were to go in to look into this, I think I would just end with saying, like, don't just jump into it and be all, you know, it doesn't take being like, you know, super spiritual and crystals and incense and you got to dress this way and, you know, be this type of person. Like you could take in this information and just be like, okay, how would I take this information in and utilize it properly within the life I already have, you know? Yeah. So, because I feel like a lot of people just want to jump into a lifestyle and they think they have to take in all the trappings that, you know, say a movie would tell you is associated with that. So, I mean, I don't know.
External direction versus like going inward, right? Yeah.
Right. Like, don't let, you know, movies tell you how you're supposed to take in information. I feel a lot of people allow that to take place, which is what stops them from actually taking information like this in a serious way, at least enough to consider it as an avenue to explore for themselves.
Yeah. With 70% of the people having an open head and being inspired by, we can be inspired by anything. We don't even know what to be inspired by, right? We take on that conditioning or what's suggested to us. It's, yeah, having mindfulness around that open head is a big deal. Only 30% of people have it defined.
Yeah. But like you said, people can, I'm just saying, like Kavalya was saying, people can grow that, right? You can expand on that.
Yeah. But if you don't know that it's open, like you have that basic understanding of your impressionability or your programmability, then you won't know what to do with something, right?
Yeah.
So this is like knowledge is important. Yeah.
So you offer this as a service to people?
I do. I offer readings. I combine astrology and human design in my readings rather than doing them separate. I feel like it kind of gets more to like practical application and your soul progression, and kind of combine those to talk about people's purpose and karma that might show up, and dharma, so our purpose, and yeah, I do it together.
Can you just tell people where to find you if they want to maybe seek you out?
Yeah, so my website is co-createvitality.com. And on Instagram, it's co-create.vitality. And those are the two places that I have most interaction with people. And I think everything is listed there, including all the yoga offerings and my schedule if anyone's, local. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm so glad we finally got to have the conversation that we had today and to bring you on and make it work. Yeah.
Yeah. And this month's theme was certainly going with the flow and using human design to kind of explain that. And hope you guys didn't miss us too much last month, where we did not have a girls club meeting, but sometimes that's kind of the point. You got to take a break and understand that you can't be functional or even valuable to anyone, or doing this kind of work. It doesn't mean anything if you're burnt out yourself, because take those breaks, because we can't all do everything and save the world. We've got to function as a team, and we've got to be healthy in the, the inside and the outside to be able to do that as, expressions of spirit, as fractions of that. We are the physical representation of that creative force. So you want to protect it. You want to care for it in healthy ways. So, this month was definitely a great topic. We kept it light, and thank you very much, Kavalya, for joining us and talking about this stuff. And we're happy to do it again, because this topic's actually really interesting.
Yeah, there's so much more. I can share the energy types next time, and we can continue going with the flow and how each energy type might do that and even manifest.
Absolutely. And anybody who wants to know, it'll be in the usuals. I know Leslie will put it up, and this will be wherever Brittany and Kavalya puts it up as well. It'll be in my Rumble. It'll be in my Substack. Go to the Substack and you'll find all the links to how to find Kavalya and her work. So thanks, everybody.
Nice to meet you. Sorry for popping in so late. I was like, I think I still have time to make it.
I'm glad you did, Brittany.
Me too. Me too. It's good to see you, ladies.
Yeah.
Yep. And
all right.
See you guys next time on the Girls Club. Bye, guys.
Bye, ladies.